Well, today will bring a lot of clarity. Many things are being decided right now. After Whitcomb speaks with Putin, it will become clear whether there will be any concessions on our side, as some are already writing about a so-called air truce, or whether there will be no concessions, and instead we'll see new harsh sanctions and more angry posts from Trump. In any case, we'll see how it plays out. And as always, I want to sincerely ask you to subscribe to the channel, especially if you've been watching my videos more than once and haven't subscribed yet. Please subscribe. Your support helps the channel grow. Thank you to everyone who already has. Now let's continue examining the situation on the front lines and move to the map. So, my friends, despite all the talk about a possible air truce, the front is living its own life. There are successes, and there are more difficult sections where things aren't so straightforward. Let's probably start with those difficult areas first, and then move on to Russian advances. And not just the advances, because now everyone's asking the same question. What's happening near Kherson? Is the Russian army really preparing a bridgehead and an amphibious landing to retake the city? At the very least, there are some indirect signs pointing to that possibility, and we'll go over those in detail. But first, let's discuss the difficult areas. As of now, there are two such areas where the initiative is, to some extent, in the hands of the Ukrainian armed forces. That's the village of Plavny in the Zaporizhzhia region, and also the Sumy region. Starting with Plavny, although the AFU didn't make any progress over the past day, it remains one of the hottest zones. The fact that there were no advances doesn't mean they didn't try. On the contrary, they did. So what happened here? A Ukrainian unit attempted to seize new positions to expand their control zone. In other words, push out Russian forces and occupy new ground. Fortunately, Russian drone operators spotted the group in time, so the attack didn't come as a surprise. They were shredded into mince. That may sound brutal, but it's a fact. Fighters from the 108th Regiment provided footage showing the aftermath of this meat grinder. The result? The line of contact remained static. Russian forces didn't advance, but they did successfully repel the Ukrainian attack. The second area where the situation is fairly difficult, and where the initiative is also somewhat with the AFU, is the Sumy region. Although, perhaps it's not entirely accurate to say, the initiative is fully with Ukraine. For example, near Yunakivka, the initiative is with Russian forces. Same goes for the Vorozhba and Yablunivka areas, where Russian troops even managed to advance about 350 meters toward Krapivshchina. But in the Kondrativka, Andreyivka, and Alexeyevka areas, the situation is extremely complicated. The AFU are also trying to expand their zone of control here. Just a day ago, they attempted an attack using 12 motorcycles, 5 buggies, and 2 armored vehicles. Nearly the entire column was destroyed by Russian drones. Ukraine lost nearly 40 soldiers in this failed assault, but we all understand this won't be the last attack. More will come, so we must remain on high alert. Let's now talk about Kherson and the situation in the area of responsibility of the Dnipro grouping. It's been a long time since we've touched on this section of the front. Probably not since spring, when there was the last attack from Oleshki toward Dachi near the Antonovsky Bridge. Since then, there's been absolute silence, which is why we haven't analyzed anything. There was simply nothing to analyze. The front was static. At best, there were some occasional artillery duels, but that's it. Now, however, everything has stirred again. Talks have started about a possible assault on Kherson. Ukrainian military analysts are discussing it. The British outlet BBC is reporting on it, and even some Russian military correspondents are echoing the same idea. At the very least, they say that the Russian army is transferring boats and vessels to the Dnipro River Delta, a move that indirectly indicates that something may be in the works. However, the main reason for all this talk has been Russian strikes on the bridge connecting central Kherson with the Korabel neighborhood located on Karantini Island. Interestingly, local Ukrainian authorities even announced a large-scale evacuation of residents from this district and nearby areas, which only fueled the rumors of a possible Russian attempt to retake Kherson. Now let's break it all down logically. Did our strikes destroy the bridge? The answer is no. The strikes continued for 2 days. There were some misses, but also some accurate hits, significant ones in fact. I've shown footage with direct hits on the bridge. However, as you know, things were built to last back then. So even after several FAB bombs hit it, on both days, the bridge wasn't destroyed. It's damaged, possibly now severely limited in function, but not destroyed. That's point one. Point two. Let's say, hypothetically, that Russian forces managed to carry out a successful landing operation and take control of the island. What next if the bridges are destroyed? I mean, attempts are still being made to destroy those bridges. So if the goal is to land troops, why destroy the bridges you'll need to advance toward Kherson? That makes no sense. It's completely illogical. If you're going to land, it means you're planning to move forward, not just sit on the island. But how can you move forward if you've destroyed the bridges yourself? And third, just look at the size of Kherson. Compare it to, let's say, Pokrovsk. Pokrovsk is already difficult enough, and Kherson is not only on the other bank of the river, but also much, much larger. So here's what I'll tell you. Ignore all those so-called experts seriously claiming that the Russian army is preparing to land and seize Kherson. That's simply impossible. The Dnipro grouping doesn't have the forces or resources required for such a large-scale river crossing and assault on a massive city like Kherson. Just look at how long it's taking to surround Pokrovsk. And that's being done specifically to avoid urban warfare. It's a smart tactic, but even this approach demands a huge amount of resources. And now imagine this: crossing a river, landing, and diving into urban combat in a major city like Kherson. Absolute nonsense. Trying to capture just Karantini Island and the Korabel district separately also makes no sense. First of all, the island has been turned into a heavily fortified zone. De facto, it's a Ukrainian base. There are drone operators, artillery, and vehicles stationed there. To take it would cost an enormous number of lives. And again, for what purpose? Even if Russia takes the island, it wouldn't be able to move forward. The troops would be stuck there, isolated and under constant fire. To sum up, no one is going to storm Kherson. The bridge strikes are meant to complicate life for the AFU on the island, to make them nervous, to force them to hold troops there, just in case, because they've already begun relocating some of them to other front lines. In particular, they've transferred forces from here to the Sumy region to launch counterattacks and retake ground. To prevent this, Russia is conducting demonstrative actions to keep the enemy on edge. Right now, 7 Ukrainian cities are under threat of falling: Pokrovsk, Myrnohrad, Vovchansk, Kostiantynivka, Kupiansk, Rodinske, and Belitske. And that's not even counting Chasiv Yar, which recently came under Russian control. This situation is unprecedented on the front. We've also received reports of a new Russian breakthrough. The settlement of Yanuarska is now coming under the control of Russian forces. The Russian armed forces may strike the flank of the Ukrainian army near Oleksandrohrad, where fighting is also ongoing. An intense battle is underway for Iskra, and reports are coming in about clashes near Zeleny High. Now to the Pokrovsk direction. In recent days, Bankova Street and Commander-in-Chief Syrsky have sent tens of thousands of troops to Pokrovsk to try and salvage the dire situation there. Logistics in this area have been severely disrupted. Around 70% of all transport heading toward Pokrovsk-Myrnohrad is being neutralized. Following Zelensky's directive, Syrsky is turning Pokrovsk into another Bakhmut. According to sources, around 60% of Ukrainian troops in the area are now refusing to fight. No one wants to go to Pokrovsk or Myrnohrad voluntarily. All soldiers are saying that there's a 70% chance of a Pokrovsk cauldron forming, one that could trap thousands of AFU troops. Heavy fighting continues around Novopavlivka. From the Orikhiv direction, Russian forces have managed to advance, though Kiev is putting up stiff resistance and is counter-attacking. This is according to Oleg Tsaryov. In the Chuny-Shine area, Russian troops are trying to break through defenses and reach the southeastern outskirts of Pokrovsk. On the eastern flank, near Nova Ekonomichna, the Russian army has entrenched itself on the eastern outskirts of Myrnohrad. Intense fighting is underway in Krasny Lyman and Rodinska. Slightly further up the map, Russian forces are bypassing Belitske from the south. North of Novye Shakh, Russian troops are approaching the outskirts of Novye Donbass, Kutuzivka, Rubizhne, and Zoloty Kolodiaz. From this line, it's less than 3 kilometers to the Kramatorsk-Dobropilya highway. Now to the Kostiantynivka direction. A new encirclement of AFU units is beginning. Russian forces have approached the Klebenbeek reservoir from both east and west, thus surrounding the troops positioned in Klebenbeek and Yekaterinivka, according to Yuri Podolyaka. The Russian armed forces have nearly driven the AFU out of Poltavka and Rusin Yar and are advancing eastward toward the lateral road between Dolha Balka and Sofiivka. Fighting continues in Shcherbinivka. The road to Yekaterinivka has been cut off. North of Toretsk, Ukrainian forces are counter-attacking around Bilahora. Russian forces are storming Ukrainian positions near Oleksandr Shultin, as well as in Predtekin. Near Chasiv Yar, there is forward movement north of Mykolaiivka along the railway line toward Kramatorsk. That concludes the frontline overview. Let's move on to political developments. Trump is ramping up his rhetoric. He again confirms that he will impose sanctions on Russia. But even he now admits that they're unlikely to have any effect on Putin. This is reported by the Telegram channel Cartel. What's striking is the tone of these statements. They're no longer about tariffs, as before, but about outright sanctions. Maybe it's just a slip of the tongue, but it's telling nonetheless. Most importantly, there's no longer any attempt to portray this as a serious lever of pressure. Trump knows he has failed to bring either Beijing or Delhi over to his side. China has directly refused to comply with American sanctions, and India will continue buying Russian oil despite Trump's threats, according to the New York Times. And now, take note, the US is urgently sending Whitcomb to Russia, a man with the reputation, in quotes, of being Moscow-friendly and a supporter of backroom deals. It's clear he's not flying in to repeat threats. On the contrary, it's likely about new proposals. Proposals Washington believes will be unacceptable to Putin and, of course, not in Ukraine's favor. The choice is obvious. In the logic of America first, Kyiv is a bargaining chip.